Hey guys, I'm Jeremy, and I'm out here in Boulder, Colorado, one of the most beautiful towns in Colorado, if not America. And it was out here in 1996 that a girl was initially found to be kidnapped after they found a 2.5-page ransom note. And a few hours later, she was found dead in her basement of her home. So a super unusual story. It's still unsolved. It's been 28 years. I had seen this when I was in high school in the 90s, and I just thought it was mostly a story because she was in these beauty pageants and she was beautiful. And there really wasn't a big mystery. But boy, I'll tell you, this story is absolutely one of the most unusual, fascinating cases I've ever seen in true crime. And one of the reasons is because you have no idea who did it. Like, it could be any of the family members, it could be someone from the outside, it could be the housekeeper, it could be anyone. But the really other thing that really throws a monkey wrench into this is that there was a 2.5-page ransom note on the stairs in the house. And so you could kind of try to depict that and see what that means. And so this is obviously a very controversial case, very interesting. In this video, I'll go to some of the scenes of the crime, like the home, some of the neighborhoods and the university, and give you a basic overview of Boulder. And then I'll go into some more of the details of this case. So just to give you a basic idea of this case, on Christmas evening, January 25th, 1996, the Ramsey family was coming home. It's Patricia, John are the parents, and Burke's the older boy, and then JonBenet is the girl that's 6 years old. They had dinner at a friend's house. They got home about 10 o'clock or so. And maybe Burke and the father hung out for a little bit, but they're all in bed by 11. The next day, they're supposed to get a private flight to Michigan at around 7:30. The mother, Patricia, goes downstairs, and on the stairs, she sees a 3-page note, a ransom note. She immediately freaks out, probably didn't even read the whole thing, but she ran upstairs to see if her daughter was there. She's missing. And so she immediately tells her husband, and she runs back downstairs, and she calls the police. The police arrive within a few minutes, and they initially search the home. They didn't find anything except for this note. And so other police and friends arrive, come and go over the next few hours. So the crime scene wasn't secure. They shouldn't have let anyone into the house, but they did. And so that was also a huge problem in this case, is that all of the evidence is really messed up. And so the captors were supposed to call between 8 and 10 o'clock. And so 8 and 10 o'clock come and go, and people are kind of waiting around, twiddling their thumbs, figuring out, like, what should we do now? And so eventually one of the detectives, Linda Arndt, mentioned, hey, John, why don't you and your friend go search, throughout the house again? So maybe John didn't think there was anything upstairs because that's where he actually stays. He's on the 3rd floor, the kids are on the 2nd floor, and the bottom floor is like the kitchen and everything, and then there's a basement. So there's actually 4 floors. The house is enormous. It's like 7,000 square feet, which a regular house is probably 2,500 square feet. So you're looking at like 3 houses together, basically. And so he goes down to the basement, into the room, which is considered the wine cellar. There's not actually wine in there, but it's a dark room with no windows. And he figured, maybe something was in there. And that's where he discovered his daughter with a noose around her neck, her hands tied up over her head, and there was a blanket on top of her. And he immediately thinks, like, I don't know if she's dead, I'll pick her up and bring her upstairs. So this is also disrupting the crime scene. And of course they knew, that she was dead once they brought her upstairs. So that's the short of it. I'll go into more of the details. And it was so perplexing because, like, who would write a 2.5-page ransom note? They determined that that would probably take about 21 minutes to write. And I believe that, especially if there was a rough draft. Another weird thing is that was written on paper from their home, apparently. So it's like, I could see if you'd bring the note beforehand, but why would you write that note after you kidnap someone, right? And so because of this, everyone's thrown for a major loop. It's like, well, the parents did it and they're trying to make some cover up. Maybe the boy did it by accident, or maybe the mom was mad about something. And so that's why it's just so controversial and so confusing, like, who would write that? And so anyway, I'll go now into the background of the family and then go into more of the details on this case. So most people, I would say, think the family did it. Probably the mom being the number one And then more recently, a few years ago, the boy was possibly blamed for it, and you know, the father. The outside intruder theory is not quite as popular, but I think that should be given a little bit more of a look. This town of Boulder at that time in the 90s was about 95,000 people. About 40,000 are students. I don't think they've really looked into students too much in this case. They've looked at everyone else around them. So I'm going to kind of look at that perspective, as well as a couple other ideas I have. So JonBenét Ramsey, the father, was born in 1943 in Nebraska, and he later goes to Michigan State University where he gets his BA in electrical engineering and then his MBA. He was also in the Navy 3 years as an officer, and around that time he got married to Lucinda Pash. They had 3 kids, but later divorced in 1978. In 1980, he ends up marrying Patricia Ramsey. She was born in 1956 in West Virginia. She went to the University of West Virginia and got a BA in journalism in 1978. A year before that, she wins Miss West Virginia beauty title. So it wasn't until a few years later that they had their son Burke in 1987 and then JonBenet in 1990. A year later, they moved to Boulder, Colorado from Atlanta for John's business. I think he just wanted a different environment, or this was a better place for business, I'm not sure. But it ended up becoming a huge company. It was called Axis Graphics, and there was a couple big mergers in the 90s. One was with Lockheed Martin, and by 1996, they had grossed $1 billion in that year. And the Boulder Chamber of Commerce named John Ramsey the Entrepreneur of the Year. So his office was actually located on Pearl Street, which is like a pedestrian walking street downtown. It's only like, I don't know, a half a mile long or something. But that business alone, I think, brought in a lot of money to that area through its employees and other things. So pretty big deal. So also a couple big things that happened in the early 90s. So his older daughter, Elizabeth, got killed in 1992 at the age of 22 in a car accident in Chicago. A truck had hit them by accident. I don't know the details, but there was no foul play or anything like that, but still a devastating thing for a family to go through. And then the next year in 1993, Patsy, his wife, is diagnosed with ovarian cancer. Super big deal. I think it was stage 4 when they found it. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it's pretty serious. And a lot of people get ovarian cancer. They're like, you could die within a few years. And so this is another really important part of the story, because she's not just living a regular life from that point on. She has a death sentence. She doesn't ever think that she'll see her kids graduate, get married, etc. So she wants the next, 5 or 10 years, whichever amount of time she has, to make sure her kids could do as many of the things that they can in life. Not just for them, but for her too, right? Because she has no idea when she's going to pass away. And she actually ended up dying in 2006, which, if JonBenet was still alive, she would have been 16. So it's true that she would not see at least her younger daughter graduate high school or get married. And of course, she was in these beauty pageants. The best case scenario would be like Miss Teen USA or something, right? So I think that part's important to the story as you move through it. So she had treatment for about 9 months at that time and went into remission for I think 8 or 9 years. So at least she did get better. But it was around this time she went to a reunion beauty pageant. And her daughter, who was, 3 or 4 at the time, saw that and was like, oh, that's awesome, Mommy. I want to do that. So it wasn't that her mother completely was pushing this onto her daughter. It was something they could bond through. And so that's also part of how that relationship developed. So anyway, it was actually 2 years after Patricia Ramsey died that they were finally cleared in 2008 from the DNA they found. Now, it's a little more complicated than that, because the DNA, there was really only a small amount that they got, and it was kind of tainted. It was a mix of maybe 2 or 3 different people, and in general, that whole crime scene was a mess. But it at least seemed like in 2008, they were pretty much cleared. Not 100%, but mostly. And the DA even issued an apology at that time. And so JonBenet, who, by the way, she got her name is the same as her dad's, except there's no H, and they pronounced it in a French way. So that's why it's JonBenet, like her father's JonBenet or JonBenet. So she's in several beauty pageants from the time I think she was about 4, but definitely from the time she's 5 and 6, she had quite a lot. She wins, I couldn't name them all, like, you know, Little Miss, Colorado, and Boulder, and Michigan, and all these kinds of things. And she was even in a Christmas parade right before the incident. And she did like a show in the mall where she has like, she's pretending to play, you know, a saxophone and sing. So quite visible in the community. And of course, after she passed away, the tabloids ran for this for years. I mean, I remember in the 90s and early 2000s, that's all you saw were pictures of this girl on all these, you know, National Enquirer and Star and all of these tabloids. But that's kind of important that although she's super, super famous now, I don't think people really knew who she was then that much. I mean, outside the pageant circle and a few people in Boulder, it wasn't like everyone in Boulder or Colorado or the United States knew about it. Now, there could be other weird stuff at the dark web at this time. I have no idea. Maybe some of those pictures did get out. I know later some of the photographers and stuff got arrested for having child porn and selling her photos. So I have no idea what's on the dark web, and obviously that's not anything I could research easily because I don't want like the FBI to show up and be like, oh, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm just researching a case. They're like, oh, sure you are. So I don't really know what was happening, but that could be important later. But anyway, she wasn't like really famous, but obviously all of her friends and people knew about this, okay? And their family was very social. The dad's off flying around the country, really busy. He's the CEO of that company that's making $1 billion. So he's probably not even really around a ton of the time. I know his daughter had complained about that a little bit. And then Patricia is, you know, hosting all kinds of parties. She's not working at the time. She's just, you know, a housewife basically. And so she's probably helping JonBenet with these beauty pageants, you know, taking her son out, doing different things. It wasn't just beauty pageants, by the way. Like, they did a lot of other things. It's just they didn't have videos of those. They had videos from other people of those pageants. So Christmas. So let's just go up to like the last couple of weeks leading up to the incident. So they had about 3 or 4 parties that month. One Christmas party they had at their house was about 150 people from their church. A couple days before Christmas, they had another party with about 30 people. She had her 40th birthday party, but that wasn't at the house. I think that was at the Brown Palace Hotel in Denver, actually, and maybe one other party. But anyway, they're really out in front of a lot of people. So there's no doubt that, like, with John being part of this big company and, you know, them being super social, that most people in town would have known them. You know, this isn't a huge town. It was under 100,000 at that time. A lot of new money. So of course, the people who were already here with old money probably didn't like them. Now this town, like a lot of college towns, is super liberal. So you're looking at 90%, you know, registered Democrats. And this guy and his, you know, wife, she's from the South. Big money, big business. You know, you could just assume they're Republicans or more conservative, which I imagine is true because he did end up running as a Republican in Michigan, like, I don't know, 10 years after the incident or whatever. And so you could imagine they had a lot of people, like good and bad. Like a lot of people would have had strong feelings. You know, he could have had some employees that hated him for certain reasons. Other women who were in the beauty pageants or had seen that could get offended for different reasons. It could be jealousy, like their daughter lost because of JonBenet, and maybe they were the best before they came to town. So there's so many other ways. You know, they had a housekeeper and other friends and people working on the house around that time. So there's a lot of people who might have held a grudge or hated them, which is also why this isn't easy, right? And so anyway, there's no way that they could have known all of the people who were in their house. And that house, as I mentioned, was huge, like the size of 3 houses. And it was like laid out really weird because, like, you know, in some houses, like you'd come in and there's only like 3 or 4 big rooms, but this had so many smaller rooms. Like every floor had like, you know, 10 different rooms. And so it's like a maze basically. And so you have no idea who at these parties is kind of looking around or people are getting ideas. Of course, it could have been the pedo thing that was an interest. It could be someone wanted to rob the house in general. It could be a combination of a lot of things. Sorry if there's a little wind noise. That's a tough thing being in these beautiful open areas. There's a lot of wind. I'll try to avoid it as much as I can. Might have to move locations. So let's go back to the actual crime, right? Let's get into that. So as I mentioned, they were at a friend's house that night from about 5:30 till about 9:30. They left that house, they dropped off some presents, and they went home. And so I think John and his son Burke played some video games or hung out a little bit and then went to bed. And I think he might have even read to JonBenet for a little bit too. So they get up in the morning at like 5:30 and they're gonna fly out to Michigan at 7:30. That's when she finds a note. She finds her daughter's missing and she calls the police. Now it's kind of interesting to note actually that the second page of that note is all about like, if you call the police or anything like that, we're gonna kill your daughter. And so I just assumed she didn't even get to the second page, you know, and the letter's addressed to Mr. Ramsey. I think they were hoping the dad, you know, would have found that and maybe would have just given him this amount of money, which, as I'll go into later, wasn't that much. It was $118,000, which happened to be his bonus the year before. So yeah, really weird. And so the police are there, as I mentioned. Several police come through, they check everything, and they don't, you know, they don't find her really any sign of breaking and entering. Later, they talk a little bit about the window in the basement, which is kind of a big deal later on. But what happened was John, the summer before, couldn't get into his home. And so he broke that window and climbed in to get inside, like in July, you know, like 6 months before. And so there's that slight possibility that they came in there, but no one really thought about it at the time. Like, I think John even like closed the window. There's a couple discrepancies. As you'll find with this case, there's 2 or 3 different stories for everything. I mean, a lot of them are just small differences, and I think people, you know, could easily forget certain things like details, especially when you're panicking, but that also certainly doesn't help this case. And so the police call itself is on record. I could play it here right now. I don't think there was anything really that suspicious at all. I just think it's, you know, she's out of breath because she ran up, you know, 2 flights of stairs and then back down. And so I don't think there's anything really weird there. Now, a lot of people will pick that apart and come up with a lot of stories. So we'll listen to that real quick and then we'll kind of break that down a little bit.
911 emergency. Police. What's going on? 15th Street. What's going on there, ma'am? We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please. Explain to me what's going on, okay? There's a note left and our daughter's gone. A note was left and your daughter is gone? How old is your daughter?
6 years old. She's gone. 6 years old.
How long ago was it?
I don't know. I just found the note. And my daughter's
Does it say who took her?
What?
Does it say who took her?
I don't know. There's a ransom note here.
It's a ransom note?
It says SBTC. Victory. Please.
Okay, what's your name? Are you
Patsy Ramsey. I'm the mother. Oh my God. Please.
I'm sending an officer over, okay?
Please.
Do you know how long she's been gone?
No, I don't. Please, we just got out. Is she right here? Oh my God, please.
Okay,
Please, there's somebody.
I am, honey.
Please.
Take a deep breath,
Please,
okay?
hurry.
Patsy.
So I don't notice anything unusual there. So there's that last few seconds of the phone call where she didn't hang up. And some people say they hear John, the father, and also Burke, the boy. And the only reason why that's important is because the parents said Burke was asleep the whole time. Now, I don't know, maybe the kid, like he heard his mom freaking out, just came down like that spiral staircase and is like, what's going on? Like, what did you find or what happened? And they're like, go up the stair, you know, go back to bed or whatever. And so people kind of make a big deal of that. I only hear the possibility of one word each for John or Burke. Like, I don't hear any full sentence, but some people will say they heard, we aren't talking to you, meaning the father. And then Burke also saying something like, what did you find? And now if Burke had did it, he might be like, what did you find, Mom? And so honestly, I don't see any red flags there. You know, you could be the judge of that. And so now let's break down this letter before we continue, because obviously that's a huge part of this case. So be prepared to be mind-fucked as I go through this letter. Not just now, as I even go through it later. It's just really bizarre. Mr. Ramsey, Listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed. And if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills and a remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early to arrange an earlier delivery of the money and hence an earlier pickup of your daughter. Any deviation of my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for proper burial. The two gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you not to provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions and you stand a 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John. You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good Southern common sense of yours. It's up to you now, John. Victory. SBTC. I had to sit down after that, huh? Completely bizarre. I mean, who would write a letter that long if you had kidnapped someone and you were in a rush and under pressure, right? Like, you would assume someone would say something like, if you want to see her again, have $118,000 by tomorrow. We'll call you soon. You know, something that wouldn't be more than one paragraph. And so I'll obviously get more into the details of what I think about that letter, but let's continue with that day of the crime. So the police come, I think the first one came 6 minutes later. And of course, you know, on the second page, they mention, like, if you call the police, we'll kill her, right? And so the police should have already not come in a marked car. It should have been like an undercover car, right? And so that was the first kind of bad thing that happened. And then, of course, several more people came. So they had 4 friends over and their pastor. And then there was, like, you know, I don't know, 4 or 5 cops initially. But by 8 o'clock, most of them left. They had made sure that they tapped all the phones, like their regular house phone, John's office phone, and even his phone in the office downtown on Pearl Street. And so the only one left there who is a police officer was Linda Arndt. And she was the only one there for like several hours with all the other people. So she was the only police officer there. They had only secured JonBenet's room. And so the rest of the house, people were like walking through, the people were like cleaning off the surfaces of the kitchen table. So it was completely botched from the beginning. So most of the information here I got from Linda Arndt's report. There's about a 15-page report that I read through, and anyone can see online. And it kind of gives you an idea of that day from her perspective of how things were going along. And so Patsy, the mother, complete mess. She's just crying over and over saying, why couldn't I hear my baby? Why couldn't I hear my baby? You know, meaning why didn't she hear her scream or something like that? She could barely even have a conversation with her because she was just so spaced out and so upset, which makes sense. John was more composed. He could have basic conversations, like knew what was going on. A couple people called, and that was his daughter and his son, and he broke down into tears explaining that, you know, she had been kidnapped. And so they were definitely very emotional during, you know, those first few hours. Also that morning, they sent Burke to a friend's house. Now, they shouldn't have done that too. They should have, you know, made sure they talked to Burke first before he took off. Now, they did it a couple days later, I think, but yeah, having him even leave the scene wasn't a good idea. They were supposed to call between 8 and 10. Now, it's also tough to say when they would call because you don't know when they wrote the note. like if it was technically 11 o'clock the night before, the next day was the day they assumed they called, that morning. But if that had happened at 3 in the morning, it could be not the 26th, but the 27th. But anyway, there really wasn't much panic or discussion. It wasn't like, oh my God, no one's called by 10. No one was really saying much. I think around 10:30 to noon, John was gone from the house, supposedly getting mail. And they had seen him opening mail. I'm not sure what he did around this time. Some people say it was unusual that the friends and the pastor were consoling the mother, Patsy, and John was separate the whole time, which I don't really think that that's unusual. I think he's thinking of who did it or what to do next. And there's already 5 people consoling his wife. He doesn't need to go there as well. He needs to separate himself, you know, like a CEO, and try to figure out what the hell happened. You know, is this someone that works for me? Is this a housekeeper? Is this some pedo? And he's probably thinking through all the hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people he knows. So that doesn't seem too unusual. He was also having serious conversations with people about, you know, should I get a lawyer? What should I do about this situation, etc. So by 1 o'clock, Linda Arndt has already been there about, what? She was there at 8, so that's almost 5 hours of just watching people, you know, crying and milling around. Everyone's just so anxious, I'm sure, because they're either waiting for a phone call or some news. So she tells John and one of his buddies, like, go search through the house again, as I mentioned. And that's when they went down in the basement, and that's when they brought her up. So his buddy ran up first and got to the phone to call for, like, an ambulance. And John was instructed by Linda Arndt to put the kid down, like, right in the hallway there. And then Linda Arndt actually ended up picking her up and moving her under, like, the Christmas tree. And then afterwards, they put a blanket on her, and they put a sweatshirt over her feet. And then, of course, John comes up and, you know, is saying things like, oh, my baby, like, obviously upset and crying or whatever. And Linda Arndt didn't say in this report, but later in an interview, you could hear her say this, that when she looked up and saw John's eyes and had thought of the whole situation in general, like, how bizarre is it that they found, you know, the kid in the basement, she immediately thought it was John. She even said she was thinking of, like, how many bullets she had in her gun left, because she would need all 18 of those bullets, because she thought John was going to have a meltdown, that he had killed his daughter and was maybe going to kill everyone in the house. So she was, like, inside freaking out. Now, I think some of her instincts there are correct. Like, in a lot of these situations where you found the kid in the basement dead and there's a father involved or family, it could be some child molestation and a murder, whatever. So she's right that it could have been a family member. But I think, too, that she's, like, literally looking in his eyes at that time, and the eyes of this man was that he wanted to kill people. Not the people in that house, but the people who killed his daughter. So I'm sure this awkward look, like, when she looked in his eyes, she did see the eyes of extreme anger and everything, because this guy has just realized that some idiot, you know, has killed my daughter. And so that's just important for later, because you could tell one of the main detectives there thinks the dad did it. And later on, the other lead detective on this case also thought it was someone in the family. And then around that time, the mother comes into the room. She couldn't even walk. She had to be carried by her friends, and got down on her knees over her kid and is like, you know, Jesus raised her from the dead like you raised Lazarus from the dead. And so totally freaking out and melting down, which, you know, in their defense is kind of a good thing, that, like, you know, if they hadn't showed any emotion this whole time, it would show that they had already kind of gotten over it the night before. But who knows, maybe they're acting, right? So I guess about an hour or so after that, they ended up going over to their friends. And then a couple of hours after that, they got the warrant to search the whole house and close the whole house as a crime scene. And actually, ironically enough, because they ended up flying out to Atlanta, you know, 2 or 3 days later. And I think the sister or one of the relatives was able to go into the home and get a bunch of their clothes for the funeral. And it wasn't just like they got, like, you know, a couple shirts. Like, they had, like, a whole, like, carload of stuff. So who knows what other evidence could have gotten taken out then, too. So completely botched investigation. And so within the first, you know, couple days, like the, I guess, 27th, 28th, the Ramsey family did give hair samples, fingerprints, writing samples, blood samples, and had a basic interview. And now the next thing that happens is that they basically stopped communicating with the police. And this makes sense because, as I mentioned, the police, they already got wind that the police and probably everyone in town thought it was them. And so, as we all know, if you follow these true crime videos and stuff, like, you know never to talk to the police, especially if they think you're guilty. So there's nothing weird there. But one extra layer to this is important. And I don't know if everyone had seen this little kind of subnote here. So they were going to obviously bury their daughter, you know, that week. And they had asked to get their daughter back because she obviously had a autopsy and she's, I guess, at the coroner's office or whatever. And the police said, we won't give your daughter back until you come in for an interview on our terms. So, dude, I mean, if someone said that about, like, my daughter or my loved one, like, no way. Like, we are definitely not communicating. So that was the end. Like, they were never going to communicate with the police for the most part. Now, in, I think about April, a few months later, they did finally do some interviews after they came back to Boulder or whatever. But that first crucial week when, you know, the police should have been a little bit more open to, like, the intruder theory or other things, they completely did not. So one of the lead detectives was Steve Thomas. And this guy from the beginning, and he even wrote a book about it, and he thought that Patricia hit the kid out of anger and basically killed her over a bedwetting incident. And that was actually one of the first books out. And of course he got sued, but he resigned after about a year and a half. And it was really a tough case because you have the police department thinks they're guilty. The DA, I can't say he thinks they're innocent. They just know they need a case. And we don't know which person in the family could have did it. And the evidence is so messed up. So how are we going to be able to bring about a case easily? But ironically, about a year and a half later or so, or a year later, they did have a grand jury convene. And they were, like, investigating that for like 13 months. And the jury, it's all sealed. You can only see like a couple pages. But they voted in favor of pressing charges against the family. One thing was like child endangerment, like putting your kid in a situation where they could have like bodily harm or get hurt or killed. And then the other charge they were pushing, it wasn't that they had murdered JonBenet, but they like covered up after the fact. Like they, either helped with burial or something to this extent. And normally, if, these jurors had gotten together for, over a year, the DA would just go ahead and pursue these charges, and he didn't. He still looked through everything and thought they didn't have a case, and I could totally see that. I mean, they had no idea who did it, and all of the evidence was all over the place. But for that reason, and because, of course, the Ramsey family had so much money, they think that, like he paid off the DA or something like that. But I don't really see how they could easily do a case, because even if one or two pieces of evidence are compromised, like that's a big deal. And you're talking about like an entire crime scene that was like totally compromised. So I don't think the DA was incorrect, as far as what I know anyway. So I'll first kind of go down the back alley. In Colorado, and maybe some other states, you don't pull into the front of your driveway. In the backyard, there's an alley that goes through, and that's where the trash collectors come, and that's where people park. So I figured I'd kind of walk down here first to get a little bit of an idea. But yeah, this back alley is important because, of course, if there is any intruder or anything, this would obviously be a more convenient place to try to get in than the main road, because obviously no one's walking or driving down this road except for, you know, once in a while, like they're coming in the park or something like that. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. But yeah, all these houses are, you know, big houses really close together. So, and a lot of places to hide too. So doesn't seem like, yeah, it'd be hard to, you know, get into that house from different angles. And I don't know how long that back fence is there. I know there's a front gate now, but there was no front gate. Like, it was pretty open in most of these areas. So even easier back then to get in. There's the neighbor here. And those would be the neighbors across the street. There's a house here, I think. Yeah, that's it here. This is the other neighbor just to the left of them, so that's also pretty close. And then, yeah, regular houses around pretty much. I don't know how much, like they mentioned they might have heard a scream at midnight. I guess it's possible. It is quiet here, but I don't know if their windows open, but I don't want to get too close. I don't need to get arrested. So yeah, just going around this neighborhood on 15th Street, I mean, I didn't think there would be any college students in those big houses, and there's not for the most part, but they're not all big houses. Like, there's a few small houses which probably house, like, you know, 5, 6, 7 students or whatever. And it looks like there's other apartments here. People would walk through these neighborhoods on the way to mountains. The bars are more on like the Pearl Street area, but yeah, there's definitely some students around here as well, like really close by. Like, of course, I don't know then in 96, but there's a possibility that some of these houses have several students living in there, very close to that house, who, you know, might be having some interesting ideas. So before I go into the whodunit theories of who committed the crime, let's briefly go through the autopsy, because I think that's really important to kind of give a little better context. So first of all, you know, we've heard she got hit in the head, right? And so when I heard that, like it was a fracture, like a skull fracture, I was assuming it's kind of like a hairline fracture. But I'd also heard, you know, it was enough that could have possibly killed her. And by the way, if you get disturbed from like sketchy images, you might not want to see some of this, but yeah, look at this photo here. I mean, that is not a small tap in the head. That is a brutal smash, you know, which I assume was from like a mag flashlight or possibly a bat. There was a bat found outside in the premise, but yeah, it looks like it could have definitely been a mag flashlight. And then as you see in her neck, you know, some people are like, oh, she wasn't really like strangled or anything, like that was real loose. And actually on one of her hands it was pretty loose, but that neck, that is tight. I mean, she was definitely strangled. So now this is a pretty interesting part of the case here that makes a pretty big difference which way it happened, and it's tough to determine, but like, what happened first? Was it that she was hit in the head first and later strangled, or strangled first and then they hit her in the head? Because of course this could have a lot of different implications, right? And there was of course there were bruises all over her body, and, you know, some markings, possibly like someone tased her or hit her with like a track from like a train track or something, like if it was the boy. There was some fruit in her body, probably pineapple, but it could have been fruit cocktail that was eaten right before she died, which is also controversial because they say that her parents said they didn't give her anything before she went to bed. So that's kind of a weird thing in the story. And then it seems like she was violated, but like no one had sex with her. It was like maybe someone had used part of a paintbrush to like put it inside her and then like cleaned her out, like with, I don't know, a rag or something. I don't really understand, but it didn't seem like basically like she was raped or anything like that. So just to give you a brief geography of this area, it's a really small area. Like from the house, like to the mountains is like a half mile. Like they could walk up that trail in, 10 minutes. Same thing. The university's just a half mile. That's about 10 minutes. If he had to walk downtown to work to Pearl Street, about 1.5 miles or 30-minute walk. And then if you were to take the closest road to the mountains is, I think, Baseline Road. And that goes up into the mountains. That's like, within a half mile or a mile from his house too. So let's go up into that area a little bit just to give you, because you can see the mountains in the background, but like, let's say you were going to hide a body or hide out. Let's just kind of see what that road looks like. So I'm not even out of the development yet. That was just kind of like one of the main parking lots. Like if you're going to go hiking in Boulder, this is one of the main parking lots to get up to this area called the Flatirons. So there was a few houses coming up this way, and now it's looking like, yeah, probably not too much. I mean, even here, it's like cliffs. This is just a 5-minute drive away, but I'm just trying to give some perspective here. So you got a couple big parking lots for like hiking areas or views over the town. So I just stopped. I'm only 2.5 miles from the house. This is a 7-minute drive. Just a random pull off here. And I mean, besides here, there's a million places you could pull off, and it's all like cliffs here. So, I mean, to be honest, it's like, I'm not saying they would just throw their kid outside the car if the parents did it, but if they were willing to torture and throw in a dusty basement, why wouldn't they just drive 10 minutes away and put her somewhere out here? And like, they might eventually find her, but it might take a week, it might take a month. If it get a lot of snow, it'll take even longer. Here, we're not too far from town, so there's not a lot of snow in winter. Like, you get it off and on, and it's so sunny it melts. But if you keep going further up, there's snow all winter, and it's already the end of December. So, like, why wouldn't you just... Now, I mean, he might have been worried that, obviously, when he drove out of his home, that someone would see his car. Let's say he was leaving at 3 in the morning, right? And maybe when he drove back in, they're like, oh, we saw a car leave at 3 and come back at, 4 o'clock or 3:30. But I don't know, he might have been able to make a more plausible alibi. He might have left at 5:30 to go say he had to go check out the airplane because he was taking that private flight. But I'm just trying to show you that, like you're literally directly against the Rocky Mountains. There's a million places to hide a body. Like, you couldn't have a better place if you wanted to do that. Additionally, if the kidnappers did it, I mean, they would have a lot of places to hide as well. So yeah, I drove 20 minutes up this road, 25 minutes tops, and this would be like a serial killer's paradise to live in Boulder. I mean, there's a million places you could dispose a body or hide. Here at another parking lot, and this is a nice day in mid-May, and there's no one around here even. And there's, 20 other pull-offs like this. But I would have no idea why you wouldn't just come up here, unless you're worried about getting caught with your car. But I don't know. It seems like a better plan than leaving it in the basement. All right, so now I'll go into the suspects that could be involved in this crime. I'm just going to go over the main ones. There's actually a lot of, a huge list. And most of those people were exonerated because the handwriting or the DNA didn't match that they found in 2008. So we're going to go over the family and then the possibility of an intruder, basically. So John Ramsey, the father. So some people think that, there was something sexual, like he was a pedophile and he was doing something inappropriate with his daughter, and his wife came in and saw that. And when she saw that, she freaked out and she grabbed something and actually went to hit John, but she hit JonBenet instead. So honestly, I don't really find that very realistic. I mean, if she had come up and surprised them both, she might be able to come close. But if he had seen her come into a room, and he would immediately put her aside and get up and, stop her from attacking him, for instance. Of course, there's the option that the father was doing some BDSM stuff with the kid and killed her by accident too. They looked later to see if there was any porn in the house on the computer or even porn magazines. He didn't have anything. And even up till today, I think they would have found something in his computer or something weird. Because most pedos, they have the highest re-victimization rates. So, like, they have the highest probability of reoffending than any other group, whether murder, burglars, anything. So it's I doubt that, like, he's like 81 today. Like, he's gone 81 years and no one's ever found any porn or anything. So the next thing is the mother theory. So the mother theory is basically that at some point, I don't know, in the night or early in the morning, she had found that her daughter had wet her bed. Now, this was a frequent occurrence, and it might sound a little unusual, but I researched it a bit, and I saw, like, I guess 15% of kids have this issue until they're, like, 5 years old, and then some of them even have it until they're almost teenagers. There could be a lot of reasons for this. It could be genetic. It could be stress. There could be a lot of factors, right? It could be abuse. So there is the idea maybe she was abused or something like that. Now, she had, like, 27 different doctor's visits over like 3 years. So that's almost like every 5 weeks or something going to the doctor. It could be part of it being the bedwetting and some other problems she had. You know, I don't know exactly. They don't disclose all of the details of that. As far as I've seen, one of the pediatricians said that there was nothing unusual with this girl. Like she had signs of any abuse or anything unusual. So now as far as the bedwetting thing goes, I don't think it's that unusual when you think about it. What could be one very logical explanation for that? Maybe not all of them, but some of them. She was going to beauty pageants as 5 and 6-year-old. Like, can you imagine you have to like memorize a song and like do a dance and go in front of like up to, I don't know, a few hundred people? I mean, she's at the mall doing it and all of these other places. So like, even as an adult, I've like played music or did comedy or taught in front of university students. And like, I'm not so anxious I'm gonna like wet my pants, but like, you're definitely nervous as an adult. So like the fact that a 6-year-old by themselves is going in front of a huge audience, like I'm sure she was possibly wetting her bed because of that. So anyway, to think that she would come in and see something like that and smash her in the head that hard just doesn't seem very realistic. Now, let's say it did happen. She fell against, a counter or something happened. She apparently wasn't dead necessarily. So why wouldn't you just call an ambulance? Even if you thought she might die, wouldn't you want that chance to possibly save her? Now, after she was diagnosed with cancer, she got really religious. Not a surprise, right? So I'm sure she believed in miracles. She was hoping that Jesus would raise her from the dead. So, I mean, come on, like she probably would have called the hospital, not fake, not like tie her up and put her in the basement and write a note for a half hour. So that doesn't really seem too realistic to me. So the last thing is the younger brother who was 9 at that time. So the idea here is that, he's jealous because she gets so much attention in the pageants. Maybe she got more Christmas presents than him, et cetera, et cetera. So he, hits her in the head with something and maybe even drags her downstairs and does some of these acts to some extent, right? I also don't find that super plausible. Now, for one thing, let's think about this. JonBenét Ramsey's 6 years old. This is a massive house, like the size of 3 houses. What 6-year-old even goes downstairs, whether even into the living room or the kitchen? Definitely not the basement. I mean, I don't remember being a kid that much because it was like several centuries ago. But I even remember as a little kid, like, when I went to the bathroom, I'd like run across the hall in the dark to get to the bathroom and turn on the light. Like areas of the house at night, like you're terrified as a little kid. It's not like you get up and like pillage the fridge and definitely not go in the basement. Okay, I mean, it's another thing if like that kid dragged her down the stairs or something like that. But even a 9-year-old, even Bert going down there, like, I don't know that either of them would. So unless he dragged her out of bed and downstairs or something like that, but doesn't seem super realistic. But one of the things that people get held up on here is about this pineapple story. So according to the autopsy report, she must have had the pineapple right before she died. So meaning that she probably didn't have it like at that dinner that night, for instance. And so it must have been in the middle of the night. She maybe came down to get pineapple, and so did Burke around the same time, because there's a picture of a bowl of pineapples on the table. And I think Burke's fingerprints and the mother's on it. And, you know, as I mentioned, or if I didn't already, remember that this house already is a big pigsty. So it's a huge mess anyway. So that might have been left out from that morning or whatever. But anyway, if she apparently had this that night and the parents didn't give it to her, then she had to have walked down or something like that. But there could be other alternative theories to this too. Like, for instance, you know, they have these little cups of like pineapple or fruit cocktail and stuff in little, you know, plastic containers, I think by the 90s. So maybe she had some hoarded in her room, you know, like, because she's not going to come up in the middle of the night, right? You're 6 years old. You're not leaving that room all night. Maybe that's why she was wetting the bed. She didn't even want to get up to go to the bathroom, which actually was right next to her room, because she was scared. I have no idea, but she could have just ate that in her room, or an intruder. New kids like stuff like that. And they even brought something down to her. But I don't think that just because there's pineapple on the table, that's like a smoking gun. And that Burke, you know, was pissed that she came down or whatever, and then smashed her in the head and grabbed her and brought her in the basement. Now, there's some other weird things besides that, of course. People look at his original interviews. I've seen a little bit of it. It doesn't seem completely unusual. And to be quite frank, if the police are witty enough, they'll be able to get some, maybe not a confession out of him, but they would definitely find some problems in his story, right? And so there's a couple unusual things, but he's like, you know, 9 or 10 when he's getting interviewed. But then in 2016, he does an interview on Dr. Phil. So this is 20 years since JonBenet was killed. And he's really weird in that interview. He's like smiling the whole time and super nervous. So, you know, like if you measure him by the most normal person, that's unusual. But how many people go on TV for this like horrendous murder that they're possibly blamed for, and he's got to act normal? Like, he's just nervous as hell and maybe a little bit of an awkward guy. So I wouldn't look at that and say, you know, this is the smoking gun. So let's say Burke did do it. There's some argument, and I don't know, he knocks his sister down or hits her, and now the parents are in a dilemma. They wake up, they're like, oh my God, you know, I think my son did this. Maybe they don't even know it's him, but like they just see that she's unconscious or something. They're like, it must have been the son. And so now they're going into the mentality like, how should we cover this up? Because we don't want to get our 9-year-old son busted for this. I mean, he's 9 years old. What do they think? He's going to go to like the Supermax prison in Florence, Colorado, and he's going to be in a jail cell with like El Chapo and the Unabomber and like KSM, like the guy who orchestrated 9/11? Nothing's going to happen. I mean, there have been cases where kids, maybe as young as 13, that have gotten busted. I remember a kid when I grew up when I was 13, he killed a like 4-year-old kid, and he did about 28 years, and he just got out last year. But that was first degree murder, and he was able to get tried as an adult. So, you know, they had just lost their daughter a few years before, and like I could understand wanting to protect him, but like you don't protect him at the cost of like the parents going to jail, because that's even worse. Like, he's just going to get a slap on the wrist regardless. You know, they've got a ton of money to get a lawyer, and they could have gotten him off, right? Or a very light charge or something. They could have moved to another city, and that would have been it. And you have to consider here, like, no offense to a lot of the viewers or people that are so sure it's the parents, but maybe they're not as dumb as you. I'm joking, but like the father especially, okay, the mother aside, like I still think she's a bright enough woman, but like the father was like an officer in the Navy, has an MBA, running a $1 billion company. Like, you don't get these kinds of positions and make that kind of money unless you're good at making decisions and rational decisions. And so like for them to be like, oh shit, oh my God, our daughter's dead. What are we going to do? Let's write a half-hour note and let's leave the kid in the basement. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense that anyone with any logical mind would have did anything like that. I mean, sure, some trailer park and some idiots would have did this kind of thing, but to think that a guy who's that intelligent, you could see him in his interviews. I mean, he's definitely not an idiot. Would keep the evidence in his house and write the world's longest notes, which of course, you know, even if her handwriting was completely different. People are going to say, well, the A's, B's, T's, and F's look similar, so it's got to be her, you know? And quite frankly, I don't think that the most people are like, the handwriting's very similar. I don't think so. They found a few letters, but I don't think that's enough. And plus, as I'll mention, we'll dissect this letter in a minute, but there was so many references to movies that were just coming out at that time. I don't think that middle-aged women are that into Speed and some of the movies that were coming out at that time. And remember the context of the situation. The mom's dying of cancer. Now, I'm sure they really cared about Burke, but I'm sure she cared about JonBenet even more, right? Because someday she hoped to see her daughter. The dream would be like Miss Teen America or Miss America. She was Miss West Virginia, and she wanted to go along this ride vicariously to see how far her daughter to get. To think that she might have been alive and then they just got rid of her. To think that they would just like not bring her to the hospital because they're so worried about Burke. I mean, what is she going to be like on her deathbed? Like, oh, the time that Burke got a home run in Little League was the most important time of my life. Give me a break. Like, I'm sure she loved the kid, but there's no way that, like, she was going to resonate with him as much as her beautiful little queen daughter. So, and no offense against the kid, but, like, I don't think Burke was going to be, like, the next Tom Brady. You know, like, it's not like, well, she's gone, but he's going to be, you know, the star football player and actor or something like that. They knew he was a little socially awkward. But let's be honest, if she had to play favorites, who was it going to be? It was going to be JonBenet. So if he had to go through some counseling for a year or something like that, big deal. Because if he really did it, he would already be scarred anyway for life. And I think it's also weird that they would have called the police right away. Because, like, they technically could have bought a little more time. Like, what's the rush? I mean, now, if this incident happened at midnight and they'd already been contemplating what to do for 5-6 hours, like, I get it. And I know they were flying out at 7:30, but they could have even called the pilot because that was a private plane. That was his buddy. He could have been like, hey, we're running late. I'll call you back. We got some things going on. And, like, you could have called the police at, like, even 8 or 9 or whatever later and been like, oh, she's missing. And still giving yourself a couple more hours to figure out, like, how you're going to go about solving this situation, not leaving her in the, like, basement cellar. All right, so now let's look at the intruder theory. One of the people who kind of pushed these ideas was a detective, Lou Smit, who was a detective down in Colorado Springs. He investigated 200 homicides and had, like, convictions for all of them. So this guy definitely knows his stuff. He came out of retirement, and the DA in Boulder actually asked him for some help. Now, the Ramsey family also had asked him to investigate, and there could be some money there, and people say, well, he's influenced by this money, so it's tainted. I don't think necessarily. I think you could still be objective regardless. But anyway, let's go through some of his ideas, because at least he had experience. Remember that Boulder, the detectives on that case had zero experience. Like the one guy who quit that first, after a year and a half or whatever, he was a narcotics officer and had zero experience investigating a murder. And everyone, like a lot of people hold him as like the authority, and he didn't even have any experience. So now, not having experience doesn't mean that like you can't solve a case, but like I think a guy who's done 200 homicides and convicted them might have a little bit more weight here. So as I mentioned, there was a window open in the basement, right? It had got broken in before because John Ramsey couldn't get into the house like the summer before, and he broke that open. And so the other theory is that they came in through that window. There was like a little bit of a footmark on the wall, and there was a briefcase below that they would have used either to get down or up or whatever. And so there was also a bat outside, which had some DNA that like from the carpet that would have been inside, but it could be like the kids were bringing it in and out. That's not 100%, but it could have been a bat that was used. There was some DNA evidence, you know, under her nails, on her pants, and on her underwear. I think 2 or 3 spots, not super conclusive, but it was enough to say that they would later find out that it wasn't the parents or the family. Another important thing in any case is that whenever there's an intruder, there's some things that come in and there's some things that come out, generally speaking. So the rope that was used as far as I know, is 550 cord, which is actually paratrooper cord, which is like really strong rope. It's real thin. It doesn't look strong, but that they didn't find any of that string or rope in the whole house. And the tape that was over her mouth was not found in the house. So there's two pieces of evidence that were not found in that home. So maybe they didn't find, maybe it was there and they didn't find it, but so that was two things that were brought in that were also taken out. There were also, a couple marks on her back and on her neck that looked like it could have been possibly a stun gun. It was exactly like 3.5 inches, and there was 2 or 3 of these marks on her, and then one really big one, I think on her face, that was black. That might have been different, but it seemed like they possibly could have used a stun gun. And so that would, explain why are these like random black marks on different parts of her body. And there was also a footprint in that basement cellar wine room, just a partial print of a boot company that's High Tech. That's the name of the boot. So you actually saw the brand High Tech. I guess a lot of police officers use this brand, so it could have been a police officer, maybe it was an intruder, but not much else. Outside, there was a little bit of snow, I think, in the front, but it basically was all melted, so there wasn't like evidence in the snow or anywhere else. So who could have been this intruder that maybe came down and either wanted to kidnap her, molest her, punish the family because they hated him? Obviously, as I mentioned, could have been anyone, right? He's a high-profile business guy. The daughter's high-profile. Like I said, I don't think that all of the United States knew who this girl was, or even people in Boulder, but a couple of pervs might have seen her at these Christmas shows or different things and knew. And then you have this huge university there, and their son, John Andrew, was a student at that time. And so, as far as I know, he wasn't staying at the house. So I guess he was staying either on campus or in another apartment, but he was only a half a mile, like the campus is right there. And I got to be honest, if I was a kid at that school, I don't know how many times his parents were gone. Like, I know his dad was gone a lot, but I would definitely be having some house parties over there, And I'm sure he had some people occasionally. I don't know about that, but I don't think I've seen much online or anywhere that they've investigated much of this idea. And so apparently the neighbor across the street said they saw John Andrew walking up to the house at about 5:30 on Christmas when the parents were off at their friend's house for dinner. And then later the guy's like, well, no, I don't know if it was him. And fair enough, it was probably getting dark. I mean, Christmas in Colorado at that time, it's probably already dark. And so it didn't seem like they really looked into it much. And it also, I've heard someone else say that in the morning they saw someone running away from that scene. To clarify, John Andrew and his sister, the adult kids, were in Atlanta already at that time. They were already there for a few days. So it was definitely not them. So they didn't really follow up on that. But it's like, wait a second. It might not have been the son. It could have been any other student at this school. Like, as soon as I got onto the first trail today, the first people I saw within 10 seconds were 2 students. Half of them are males, probably about 20 years old, that look like John. So it's like, holy cow, like this totally could have been someone who maybe didn't even directly know John Andrew that well, but kind of heard through the grapevine, like, yeah, I know this guy, we're partying at his house, man. His dude got $118,000 bonus. And so the reason why I think that number is also important is because it's a slap in the face to a lot of people. Like, if you're a house worker, or most workers in the 90s, like even the detectives on that case at that time were probably making like, I don't know, 50 a year, maybe less. The housekeeper's probably making like 20, 25. So like his bonus alone is like people's wages in 2 or 3 years, besides the $1 million or whatever he was getting paid each year. So I think that's also why that number might have agitated people, that like he might have been bragging, or maybe his wife or other people had found out about the bonus, and that might have annoyed people that it was so much bigger than what anyone would get paid at that time. Now, $100,000 today is kind of what you need to get by, sadly enough. So that's not crazy now. Like, that's almost like middle class. But at that time, making 100 even was a lot. So let's take a look at some of the main things in this paper here, this ransom note. A lot of this stuff was referenced from movies, either in the past or up at that point.
Listen very carefully. notify the police, your wife will be killed. If you notify the media, she will be killed. If you deviate from our instructions in any way whatsoever, she will be killed.
If I even think you're being followed, the girl dies.
Do not attempt to grow a brain.
So those are just a few references, but there's tons of stuff out there. You know, some of these are old, but there was a lot newer ones. Speed had just come out the year before. But the movie Ransom had actually just come out like a month before. It was released in November 1996, and it was still in Boulder theaters when the murder occurred. So that movie is like, ironically, you know, super similar to like the Ramsey family. You know, a rich guy with a big company. In this case, they end up kidnapping the son instead of the daughter, but a very similar theme. And they actually only ask for $2 million, which also for like a movie, that's not even that high. So almost this entire letter is just references to movies, you know, around that time or before. I think the Foreign Faction was from Star Trek. And ironically, even John Andrew, the oldest son, within 2 days brought this up. He's like, these are all popular movies out right now. And later, the family even later published some things in the newspaper stating that this is the person we're looking for, someone who's really into these kinds of movies. So, I mean, this definitely seems like the kind of thing younger people are into, and more men. You know, not that there's no older women, but I mean, this definitely seems like, you know, college students would be more into this. You know, they have a lot of free time, and they spend a lot of time watching movies. Back in the day, you didn't really have good access to as much like good TV as you do today. Like now you've just got a million options on your internet. Back then you'd have to, you know, rent movies at Blockbuster or whatever. And so if you did buy a few movies, it was normal to watch some of the movies over and over. So it's not a surprise that someone might have been watching these all the time. So yeah, I don't know how many middle-aged women like Patsy were into this kind of thing. These movies obviously are, you know, generally rated R, so she's not going to take her 6 and 9-year-old kid to see these movies. And apparently John and Patsy mentioned they're not really into movies. You know, I'm sure they're really busy and don't have too much time for that, especially if they can't bring the kids. So I don't know. Maybe Patsy, who's into beauty pageants, is into movies about kidnappings. And so now, even in the middle of the night, if she hadn't seen these movies, it's not like she could have just Googled that like today and got all this information quickly. I mean, Google didn't even come out till 1998. And Yahoo had come out a couple years before, but search engines 28 years ago sucked. And also, I don't know why she would write something like good Southern common sense. He's from Nebraska and lived in Michigan for years. So what do college students do for a living? They write papers, you know, most of the time. And one of the problems you have is that your papers are always too short, right? You get a few pages, you're like, oh, you're counting them, you need to get 10 or 15 or whatever. And so you're used to writing at least 3 to 5 pages, like your freshman year. So I think they're kind of programmed to writing long things where a regular person would have just written, you know, 4 sentences or whatever. So in the last 18 years, I've been an English teacher for about 15 of those. I've done everything from little kids to adults, college students. I just quit my last job just less than 3 months ago to adults who are from all over the world, you know, from Latin America, Asia, Russia, Iran, Tajikistan, Ukraine, whatever. So I'm used to grading papers for a long time. And I think the reason why this seems really weird to everyone is because they're not used to seeing, you know, papers from non-native English-speaking people. So, for instance, a lot of students don't know the difference between, like, when you write things down or when you say things. Like the first line, listen carefully. Like, you don't write that. That's something you say, like in a movie, but you don't actually write that. They also change from we to I and R. They change from Mr. Ramsey to the less formal John as it goes through. There's only a couple of misspelled words, like business and possession, which fair enough. I mean, I think that could be normal, especially possession. But students also a lot of the time use some weird words that, like, they find in the dictionary that, like, we don't really use very often, like attaché with the accent. You know, they could just be like,
a briefcase or a bag or whatever. And the phrase grow a brain seems pretty weird to me. Even for that movie, like, I don't remember anyone ever saying that in person. So them not knowing that seems kind of corny to me. I don't know. You could let me know in the comments if anyone uses that on a normal basis. And of course, when they write papers, not just because they're college students, but they always take a very long time to explain things because they don't have a good command of not just the language, but they don't have confidence because they're not that good. So what they write on 3 pages, they don't realize they could have done in 1 or 2 paragraphs. And so they repeat themselves in different ways, saying a lot of the same things. And they also copy a lot of things, especially in China. So they know one way to try to be correct is to copy, the writing of other people or what you've heard. Because you don't want the reader to be confused with, your jumbled grammar or whatever. So you just kind of write out from movies and books and things like that. The 100% and 99% thing is kind of weird too. Of course, students all the time are looking at percentages for their papers and their tests, right? You got an 80, you got a 95. Even the 99% thing's kind of weird. He says, you have a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. So it's like he has a 1% chance of saving her. So it's all weird because, they're not probably native speakers when I look at this. I'm not sure about that SBTC at the end. It could be Saved by the Cross, I Shall Be the Conqueror. Could be their last names, their first names, the countries they're from. I have no idea. The victory thing is kind of weird. It makes me think they could be military or kind of want to be military. And I'll mention a little bit more about that in a few minutes. And also, there was a rough draft in the House that actually originally started with Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey. And they stopped at the R, and they changed it to Mr. Ramsey. And probably because they just wanted him to read the letter because he might have actually not called the police and just given them the money. So anyway, I'm not saying for sure it's a foreign student, but it definitely could be. And if I was a detective, I would, there's probably not that many foreign students at that school, maybe 1,000 out of 40,000. So you could narrow down the papers you might look at in that school or from their, college admissions papers, for instance. And that also kind of rules out the low IQ homeless pedophiles in town. So sorry, Gary Olivia, but I doubt you know what an attaché is with the accent side. So yeah, they're probably looking in the wrong direction here. So let's consider it's a group of foreign students. And let's say they do have some grievances against the USA or whatever. And so it's not just, money or sexual things, but, there's this chance it could be a political act as well. And maybe not all of the people acting in this all have the same reason. One might be for money, one might be for sex, one might be for politics, right? And so if you look at $118,000, that might actually convert into another currency and be an even number. Around the mid-90s, the U.S. was bombing Bosnia. They had a no-fly zone there because Yugoslavia had broken up and all of those countries went to war. And so they were bombing, Serbian targets and planes, and that was a huge deal throughout the whole 90s. And, I looked at the Bosnian currency, and that was about $175,000. China was just under $1 million. I bet there's a lot of countries that could be possibly an even number. But yeah, maybe that wasn't it. Maybe they just saw his bonus and one of these, they could see the checks and different things were around. And they just wanted a low number to be more reasonable. So let's say there were 4 people involved and they were going to split it 4 ways.
And so a quarter of $118,000 is $29,500. Okay. So that's about the tuition at that school for a couple years, 4 years. I mean, just to give you some insight into, people who study in America, I had actually worked in Nepal as a language consultant giving advice to students. And it was a while ago, and I kind of did a little research on that. And when you apply to America to go for your bachelor's or graduate school, it's not really that hard to get into a school because they basically want your money. They're getting a lot of outside money if you come. The more difficult thing is getting the visa. So in order to get the visa to America, you have to show that you have enough money for 1 year. But that's it. You don't have to show that you have all of the money for grad school or all 4 years. So to me, like, almost having 30 grand would cover 3 years of a bachelor's degree. Now today it's about 40 grand a year for outside students. 28 years ago, it was, I think, about 10 grand a year. So, I mean, and plus, like, that kind of money in developing countries, 30 grand or even 118 grand was a ton of money for students. I mean, you could live in somewhere like in the Balkans for easily 10 years. I mean, 30 grand, like, it's, even today, like 10, 15 grand could last you probably a year. So, like, that 118 is nothing for a millionaire and all the fat cats in town, but like 118 is a lot for a student. And maybe they had seen the pay stub going through some of their paperwork or heard something, and they were like, let's not get too greedy. If we ask for too much, he might resist. Let's just ask for a smaller amount. He won't call the police, and we're going to get our tuition paid for or money for whatever else is going on. So now there was about 1,000 students at that time. Do I think that's super plausible that like they're from Bosnia or something or Serbia? I don't know. I mean, maybe it's not that realistic. Maybe they're from Latin America. I don't know where these students might be from. But I know that that's not a lot of money for most people except for students. So the next question, why would someone wait to write the letter when they were already inside? Like, everyone's like, no one would ever do that. Let's think about it. A lot of these college students, let's say if they were going to do it, because these aren't your total idiots. Maybe they had never conducted something like this kidnapping before, but they're the kind of people who actually probably sitting around, maybe smoking a joint, having some drinks, and like, if they were going to do this, they probably thought of it for a few months and thinking this through. You come up to this house. Now, I'm sure they had come before to case a joint. There's no way any person would go into this house, which is like a maze, while the parents were home, right? So I think they either went in when they were at dinner that night, or they even had been there before. But the first thing you have to consider is that they did have an alarm in that house. The only reason why they didn't use it is because the kids kept tripping the alarm and coming in and out, and they had a bunch of problems, so they hadn't been using it the last few years. So now, even if there's not an alarm, like we already walked by those houses, there's a lot, those houses are really close by. Like, this isn't a house like way out in the countryside where, like, you know, no one's going to see you come in. And so the original police who even came at, 6 a.m. that day only took like 6 minutes. So what happens if, like, you might even you have this idea for kidnapping, right? And you might even have a stun gun or something on you that's incriminating. So you go in, and maybe there is no alarm, but someone next door calls or the alarm goes off, whatever. Let's say the police show up, and you're like, holy shit. And you try to escape, somehow they get you, right? They're like, oh, what were you doing? It's like, oh, nothing, we were just looking around. We promised we weren't going to do anything. Oh, yeah, I bet. Put your hands behind your back. Let's check what you got. Okay, you got like some tape, maybe a stun gun, or maybe maybe they didn't have that their first time they cased it. Let's say there's nothing on them. But then they pull out a note that's like, 3 pages long. Like, what's this? So, oh, you just went from like a minor charge of burglary, like potential burglary, to like kidnapping, like intent to kidnap with bodily harm or intent to get money, blah, blah, blah. This is the difference of like probation or a few months in jail or 20, 30, 40 years without even doing the act.
So anyone with common sense will be really worried about, being caught with notes or weapons or whatever and potential alarms. And they'd even be concerned with dogs. And the Ramseys did have a little dog. And I think he usually stayed with the guy across the street. He was only there some of the time, but because they were flying the next day, they had already given the dog to the neighbor across the street. So yeah, this might have really been different if either that alarm was on or the dog was home. So let's now look at what they would need to do this and how it happened. So first they need some gear. You could get a lot of this stuff from like, a hardware store or whatever. But an Army surplus has everything. Boulder used to have one before, but I guess it's out of business. But on my way up there, I stopped at one, not too far from Denver on the way there. And yeah, they have everything you need. I saw they had the white 550 cord, which, they obviously would use to tie her up. Obviously, you could get tape there or anywhere else. A mag flashlight, even if you need boots or other things, but you could get that anywhere. And today, I don't think they have too many stun guns. They have knives everywhere like crazy, but back in the day, stun guns were pretty easy to get anywhere. I think now there's a little bit more restrictions. And of course, if it was a group, they probably bought walkie-talkies there or somewhere else, but that would be a good way to communicate. Of course, they wouldn't say, very explicit things on the walkie-talkie, but some coded language. Or if they spoke a different language, perfect, especially if it's a, Spanish maybe you can get away with, but if you're speaking Serbian or some other, Arabic language, I doubt anyone in Boulder would pick that one up. So the next part is, the way that they would go in. So the main doors are most likely going to be locked, and they might have an alarm. And the dog is probably on the, ground floor. And you could even try the windows. I knew they had Christmas lights out, so that could have actually been another way that they got in. Everyone talks about, the basement window, but it's like they had a lot of windows on that house on the first floor, so if one was open, that would have done the job too anyway. But even some windows, even back in the day, had alarms, so that could be risky too. And plus, the main point is that you don't want to be seen, so if you go into a window, that's very strange, especially on the first floor. If you kind of can hide below and go into a window where people can't see you, it's a little better. Same thing with, you can't go into the front door or somewhere where anyone could see you, right? So it's got to be kind of sneaky. I remember when I was in the Army, over 20 years ago, I got robbed when I was gone for a 4-day weekend, I think over Labor Day. The front and back door were locked, of course. And I didn't think about it, but just to the right of my door is an extra utility closet, which I only had a mop or something not important. And so probably some kids walked into that closet, closed the door behind them, and just kept kicking on that wall, kicked right through. And they didn't even get anything important. They just broke a bunch of my shit and threw shit all over the place. But yeah, no one could see, them doing that. And so that's the whole point, is sneaking in a way where people can't see you. So they're obviously not going to go to the main door on the east side, right? There was no trees back in the day or a gate, but the neighbors across the street or anyone driving by, could see you if you're trying to break and enter through the front door or a front window. So you're definitely going to go somewhere around the back. Now, there's cars also in the back or could pull into the garage. So that middle door, basically next to that grate, would be the most sensible option. But yeah, I'm sure they stood next to that drainage ditch and, were considering maybe either breaking that door or looking at the windows around there, and you would have looked down to the right and you would see a broken window down there, probably pretty easily. Because like I said, getting into a hidden area is a great idea. And they pulled up that grate and you could get down there. It's now I'll go into a little bit more details about that entrance, because so many people think that because there was cobwebs or whatever, there's just no way people could get through there. And so, as I already mentioned, John broke that window months ago in July when he was coming in. He didn't have the key for his front door, which, of course, that's ironic, right? What is the closest place to go? You look down to the right. And he broke that window and went in. Now, remember, some people look at the window and they don't realize there's 4 windows in that pane. And so it's not it's one window that he broke through and there's all that glass there. That's a close-up of one of the small panes, so you could reach your hand and lift up the latch and open up the whole window, which a person could definitely get through. You could see that Detective Lou Smit. He's 5'9" and was 65 years old and was able to get through there. So definitely no issue there. Now, the cobweb thing, you could see that cobweb, is only, in the corner. It's probably only, 3 or 4 inches, maybe 5 at the most, but probably 4. And it's even kind of broke at the closest corner, meaning people probably actually did stick a couple of fingers through, or maybe most of their hand, it did kind of break it. And so it's you definitely could get by without, totally disturbing that cobweb. Especially if you have a flashlight and you saw it, you could just go around it instead of getting it on you. So we have to assume that because John broke that window 6 months before, I know that basement, most of that house is a big mess. But I'm pretty sure, like, someone would have at least cleaned up glass. At least that was inside. The outside glass, probably not as much, right? And so there shouldn't be any glass inside for the most part. Now, Fleet White in the morning had gone there and pulled that suitcase back, a couple feet, and he saw a big piece of glass on the floor that he put on the ledge. And I think maybe it was a little bit cracked, but I think he closed it, so I'm not sure why it was open later. And so now here's a really interesting thing. I watched, obviously, this whole video that's, 40 minutes long, walking through the house. And, man, it seems like a really important piece of evidence to me. When you look at that suitcase, they kind of zoom in, and there's a tiny piece of glass there. Now, that's huge to me because that's unlikely to be there from, 6 months ago from when John, came in. Because, first of all, that suitcase was brought down by him or his son or something at some point, and I doubt it was exactly in that position under the window. I think it was somewhere else in the basement in the last few months. And so to me, that means that someone probably came in, and you can see even a mark below the window where maybe they had their foot and they're trying to, hold themselves if they go down and have their foot there and kind of, landed on the ground or whatever. And, maybe even maybe they're all not super tall. And so they looked around for a suitcase so that the next person could come in. And now it could, let's say it's one person. They come in and they put that suitcase there to get out. I mean, that glass would have been stuck, let's say, in their boot, but then they were walking around the whole house for, a few hours or at least, an hour or whatever. So it seems like to me that they would have actually, the second person would have stepped on that. And that glass kind of got embedded in there a bit. Or it could have happened the other way. But regardless, that seems like a pretty big deal to me in this case that I haven't really seen too many people online talking about. And so, yeah, the first person came in. And, they didn't want to come in all at once because that's even more suspicious. 3 people ducking down. So they came staggered. One person came in. They checked it out a little bit. Made sure, maybe no one came. Maybe they even probably waited even a half hour or something. And, the cops didn't show up or anything. They talked to the walkie-talkie or wave. They're like, come on. Second person comes. They have the suitcase there. And so, yeah, those, 2, 3, 4 people, whatever. Probably, 2 or 3, but of course could be an individual. And, yeah, now they've got 4 hours in the house. So now they have plenty of time to write a letter. They have plenty of time to look through all the rooms, what they're going to do. I mean, that's more than enough time. And some of them probably did walk in front of the house because that back fence looks pretty old. That looks like that might be over 30 years. But that front was all open, so they didn't come up to the front door. They would have just walked around to the back and got straight into that grate, and I don't think the neighbors could easily see from that angle. And you know what? They might have been even living in one of those houses nearby. Maybe not an immediate neighbor, but even diagonally or a few houses down. I saw kids playing beer pong in the front of a house just across the street from the Ramseys and maybe 3 houses down. So I really wouldn't be surprised if there's someone nearby that could easily just watch the Ramseys when they're leaving, coming back, and or they could have been at either end of the alley, just eye shot of the alley. So it's not like you need to stand in the alley. You could be, a couple 100 feet away and just be on a wall and be like, okay, I see the family leaving. Let's go. So they're in the house, and they have plenty of time, as I mentioned. And now they might have just waited in the basement, and they would just hear them come in at some point. But then you still have to come up and sneak into her bedroom, which is a little risky. Now, Melinda's bedroom is just next to JonBenet's. So, I mean, they could have just hidden there. So I'm not sure if the intruders knew all the details of everything going on. But, they mostly just saw the 4 people in the family. John Andrew occasionally went there, but Melinda had that room, but she wasn't living there. And so you could have totally hid in her room, or you could have even gone to the balcony of JonBenet's room. And, because a chance in December of her, putting her into bed and, checking the door or anything, I doubt it. They're going to think who would be up on the balcony. So the balcony or Melinda's room would be great. And then, they could be ready. One person grabs her, with a pillow or something like that, because you can see there was a pillow downstairs. Not that that means much. There's so much of a mess there. I doubt they would have used the stun gun because she might flip out or it might make noise. Now, some people are like, well, the parents are just upstairs, so, they probably would have heard that. But you have to remember, they're on the far right. Like, to basically remember, these are two buildings that are, like, put together. The left white side is a big new addition. So this is like two houses put together. The parents are all the way on the east side, and she's basically all the way on the west side. I mean, I don't know how many paces that is, but that's a far distance. I mean, even if they were on the same floor, there's a possibility they wouldn't hear that. It's so far away. And you have to remember, the parents probably were up at like, 4:30 getting all those presents ready? I mean, some of the presents, I think, like maybe the bike or something was at the neighbor's house, and the kids get up early as hell. So by the time they go to bed at 11 o'clock, they've been up like 19, 20 hours, probably had a few drinks that night. I think one or two of them maybe even took sleeping pills. So even if there was a little noise or a struggle, like there's such a far distance between them that they wouldn't have easily heard, like unless like she screamed. So now remember, they're not just going into the basement because it's more quiet. They're probably worried that John might have set the alarm when he got home, before he went to bed. So if they do go out the front door, they might hit a noise alarm or a silent alarm, and the cops could be there in 5 minutes. Or they could alert all their neighbors, and now you've got, 2-3 people and a little kid, and like you're done. So the best idea, I think, would be to come in through the same way. And plus, if you go up to that main floor, there's a slight chance that, John or the mother see you, like they're going down to get, I don't know, a drink or something, or food, or even Burke. And, I know if I was a father and I saw some weirdo with my kid, like, it would be like, you better have a gun, because it's not going to go down very well. And also during that night, the neighbors mentioned that the lights in the kitchen were dim, which they hadn't seen before. It was generally just on or off, not dim. And there was a couple other lights that were on, maybe in the sunroom or somewhere else, that usually weren't ever. So that's kind of interesting, too, that, there's something different going on for sure. Now, of course, that could be just a family or something different, besides Intruder. So I'm sure that, he or this group or whoever had JonBenet was obviously trying to probably do things the nice way at the beginning. Oh, don't worry, we're friends of your family. We're going to go, take you to Santa. And, we're going to take you to a nice place. And, maybe she was even kind of quiet at first. They slowly took their hand away from her mouth, and she was quiet for a bit. And then she probably screamed or freaked out, especially if they're down in that basement, which I mentioned she would already be terrified of, because she's with 2 or 3 strangers in a basement in a corner. And I doubt she would, act normal. And plus they're, probably trying to reason with someone, thinking it's like an adult or like a movie and it would be easy. But like, she's a 6-year-old kid. You're not reasoning with an adult. And so I imagine she was freaking out, and they were having a little bit more of a hard time than they thought. And they probably used a stun gun at some point, thinking it would knock her out. And stun guns aren't meant to do that. They're just meant to like make your muscles contract, and it's just super painful. And you can imagine once they did that and she was still awake, she was freaking the fuck out. Like probably screaming, moving. And, they probably still try to get her chill out, but that wasn't going to happen at that point. And none of those threats are going to work. Like, I'll kill you if you don't do this. Like, she's just going to keep squirming around. And, at this point, I imagine if they didn't do it already, I mean, they had 5 hours, so they probably made the garrote already. But maybe it's at that time they did, and they started tightening it on her, and they're like, be quiet, be quiet. So I'm not sure what their plans were for the ransom. Both are super risky because, obviously there's 2 really risky situations here, because you could get caught with the kid and you could get caught getting the money. So one of the chances of minimizing your risk is tying up the kid in that basement and just leaving her there. And then they write the note, they get the money, and then they tell them, hey, she's in your house in the basement, which could have worked because they actually, as we know, because they thought that she wasn't there, they didn't look hard, and they never found her till 1 o'clock anyway. So that could have been a good idea. But, they probably realized how she was freaking out, that she was probably going to eventually get out of her ropes or eventually be able to scream. And for whatever reason, I'm sure someone just got really frustrated. Maybe they were trying to get her out of the window and she was yelling and moving. And then they were like, well, let's keep her in the room. And she's yelling. Maybe she saw their faces or something. I have no idea. But at some point, someone lost their temper and they hit her as hard as they could in the head. And then they probably realized they're like, shit, she's dead. And they already had left the note upstairs. Or, technically they could have did it afterwards. Some people are like, oh, they definitely did it after. And yeah, and they just took off and they're like, shit, like, we're never going to get this money now. Like, they'll probably find her in the morning. But I'm sure they were pretty scared because especially if they were young, remember, this was just in order to get some money for school possibly. And, they could have still got busted kidnapping her and it would have been a lot of time. But killing her would have been jail for life. And at that time, technically, you could have gotten the death penalty. They later abolished that. But yeah, I mean, you would, with all the public outrage, you could be sure to get the death penalty. And another thing, too, about the note is that it could have just been a decoy, just to delay the police like it did. They didn't find that body for, 5-6 extra hours. And they got into a car. There were some people that said there was a blue Astra van around that area for a couple days. Who knows? It could have been a family member from a house nearby. But maybe they wanted to buy time to get out of Colorado to, who knows, Utah, which is 6 hours away. Or to Wyoming, which is maybe, 3 hours away. Or they were getting on a plane. Maybe they're international students flying overseas. And they're like, they're hoping to get some money that morning. Take off on the plane. And then by the time they're alerted, the airports or the roads, they're gone. So that could have been a great decoy. So, even if it's not the students, there was a lot of weirdos around that area. It was determined there was more than 100 burglaries in the Ramsey's neighborhood in the months before her murder, which is a lot because, there's not even that many houses around that area. There's probably, 200 houses and half the houses were burglarized. There were also 38 registered sex offenders within a 2-mile radius of their house. And then I saw another story of some dude who was sneaking into houses. I think he snuck into 15 or 20 of them. And he wasn't even taking anything. I'm not sure if he was sexually assaulting people or what, but that's pretty weird. So any of these burglars or this weird dude might be taking it to the next level. I'm going in there, maybe doing sexual assault or whatever. And now I'm just going to raise it up to the next level, and now I'm going to, try to take this kid or whatever. So, yeah, it could have been really anyone. So I'm not sure about, her being sexually assaulted. Apparently it was a paintbrush that was used, and they cleaned her out. I'm not sure if that's a trophy or whatever weird shit they got going on. But, of course, it could just be motivation to torture her in general. Maybe there was no intention to take her out, that they just want to torture her, sexually assault her, and, that's all they were going there to do. Because, they hated him or whatever reason. But I think if you look at the autopsy photo, it might explain why they might have used that paintbrush instead of something else. And if she was hit first or choked first.
And so if you look at the autopsy photo of the rope around her neck, you could see that she might have been trying to pull that off, and there might be marks of her nail on her neck. Honestly, if someone had a rope around your neck, you would grab here and your thumb would be down here, and it's there's a mark on her neck, and then there's little marks that could be her nails above the rope. And so this would also imply that she wasn't knocked out first, that they were trying to do some BDSM thing.
And so you could just imagine if it was their first kidnapping, they were nervous as hell anyway. And let's just say this guy couldn't perform what he went there to do. And out of his own frustration for himself, he took that out on her with, a huge mag light or a baseball bat. And now as far as $118,000 goes, or any other possible money to be made, who knows? Maybe this was some big time, pedo ring or this stuff they talk about where, people even maybe flew in and, they had seen her on the dark web. And you can imagine, what's a lot more than $118,000? A videotape of what they did to her that night. And they got that out of the basement and they got that to whatever sick pervert. I can imagine that could easily be $1 million. So anyway, this was a super interesting case for all of us who really go in for the deep dive. I don't know, I must have at least spent a couple 100 hours on this. But of course, just an absolute tragedy and super sad for JonBenet, who, is just a 6-year-old baby. And as well as their family, even if one of the parents or both of them are guilty, it's still horrible for the siblings. But what's also really sad after going through all this is how everyone basically is siding with the police here. Like, it seems like people are so sure that the parents did it. Like, the intruder idea seems like you're the wackiest conspiracy theorist who, believes there's alien lizards in the center of the earth that control us or something. And, usually people are against the police. And, the police didn't do a proper investigation at all. Like, they only asked the immediate neighbors. And that was probably only to get more dirt on John and Patsy. And so, by not even asking, anyone if they saw anything, that's insane how people seem to be so sure of themselves. And, I get it. Like, if you didn't spend much time on this, you just watch a documentary or two, or you read for a couple hours or even a day, I thought the parents did it too. And I'm still open to that idea, at least. The handwriting, is really similar to Patsy's. When I look at certain things, it's not, and I look at others, I'm like, geez. But, I still don't see why she would write such a long one. And, and they would be able to identify her, right? So it, could possibly be a coincidence. And, I'm sure if I look into every detail of this case, I could find that there's a lot of things that point to the Ramsey family. But, when I look at the big picture, it just seems doubtful they did it. And I think part of this is, a lot of people, when they do research, they're like ants. They see all the little details, but they don't see the big picture. And also, I understand people like conspiracy theories, and you like to solve a puzzle, right? You find out all these little details, and you're like, you did it. I figured out the puzzle. And the intruder theory doesn't solve the puzzle. You're left hanging. But, I think John said it best at, one of these conferences I saw. He said something to the extent, it wasn't just about a little girl that was murdered. It was the persecution of the family. And it's all about jealousy. He makes more than most people do in a lifetime in a year. They have a house that's 3 times bigger than everyone else. She was, a beauty pageant, stay-home wife with this princess daughter. And they didn't like all these videos of, JonBenet going to all these pageants, which to me does seem weird. But, realizing she has cancer, it's like, okay, I guess she could wait till JonBenet's 16, but guess what? She'll be dead then. So, if you look at the whole story, a lot of the stuff kind of makes sense. And other things, like writing a really, really long paper and keeping the kid in your home doesn't make any sense when there's a lot of other options they could have taken, especially for someone who's pretty level-headed and running a company. And also, yeah, he's conservative, right? The family's conservative Republicans from the South, and they're a bunch of elite liberals, so they were just a perfect family to hate. And that's true that I think that's why this case was ultimately never solved, because it's one thing that the police are against it, but even the grand jury and everyone in town was against them. And it's too bad they just didn't stay in Atlanta. Because just really bad luck in that regard.
But anyway, try to keep an open mind when looking at this case. Obviously, we all don't have a lot of information. It was a contaminated crime scene. JonBenet and her mother, Patsy, are buried in Georgia. So they obviously left Boulder after, 6 months or so. I wouldn't want to live here either if you had been through that, right? So yeah, really sad case. I hope this DNA technology proves once and for all who did this, whether it was a family or an intruder or whatever, and we could finally put this case to rest, because it's really tragic. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I've got a lot more on this subject. I just did a video on Columbine and some other crazy stories in Colorado, and I'll have more to come, and I'll also follow up with this video. So anyway, take care, guys, and I'll see you next time. Be safe out there.